All right, I haven't made a video in a while, but this is important. I ran for Congress back in 2012. Let me rephrase that. I was dumb enough and gullible enough to run for Congress back in 2012. And it was not my own idea. At the time, I was actually asked to run for Congress. But what I'm going to tell you is important. That experience is important about what I'm getting ready to tell you in regards to this impeachment movement against Trump. And again, just to reiterate, I did not win. I won the primary. I did not win the general election. I won the primary in a very heavily Democratic district. But I ran for Congress in 2012. And that experience is very important to what is happening today. And this is going to be a little longer video, but I think when I get to the end, you'll understand why it's important. So when I was asked to run for Congress, and again, it wasn't of my own idea, I met a gentleman, and we had several long political discussions, and he called me at the house one day and said, "Hey, Brad, I really think you ought to consider running for office." And I said, "Well, that's funny. I considered running for sheriff at one time, just because I think we need good law enforcement, and I didn't really care for our sheriff at the time." He said, "No, I think you need to run." He said, "I think you need to think bigger." I said, "Think bigger?" He said, "Yeah, I think you need to consider running for Jim Cooper's seat here in Tennessee." And Jim Cooper was my congressman when I lived in Davidson County. I no longer live in Davidson County. So I listened to what he had to say. He said, "I can help you raise money." I did not realize at that time he had been a campaign finance type manager for Ronald Reagan when Ronald Reagan ran for office. This gentleman is older than me, but at that time, of course, when he worked for Ronald Reagan, he was much younger. I don't really know what his position was, but he had been involved in politics quite heavily. At one time was a multi-millionaire. And I don't really know what he saw in me, but I really do have a heart to change things for the better. I have a heart for conservatism. I have a heart for Christian views. I have a heart for America. I have a heart for the Constitution. I have a heart for my children that are growing up. And so I really contemplated it, and I thought, why not? Jim Cooper needs to go. He had not had a really viable opponent for a number of terms. And so, well, I didn't think he had anyway. So I was dumb enough to, in a mostly Democratic district, to go run for Congress. But here's what this guy told me probably 3 or 4 meetings in. And it took me a while to absorb what he said and understand what he meant. And this is what's going on with Trump today. This is why Trump is going through what he's going through today. This is why we have possible, impeachment here. Is this man said to me, "Brad, you don't know it, but when you win this election, you're going to be an instant millionaire." I'd never given that a thought. It had never been a thought. It had never been a presupposition. It had never been anything I had ever considered. In fact, when I agreed to run, I didn't have any idea what the salary for a congressman was. I just had no idea. So I contemplated this idea. I didn't really ask him why. Usually, sometimes if it's something that makes me uncomfortable, I will think about it before I will respond. But I thought about this for maybe a couple of weeks, and then he introduced me to another congressman. We sat down and had dinner at a place in downtown Nashville. I won't say the congressman's name. He was a previous congressman. He's no longer a congressman. His family is involved in politics still. And so I sat down and had dinner, and it began to be very clear to me about what this gentleman was telling me. He was saying, "Hey, when you get in Congress, you're going to be an instant millionaire." Now, this previous congressman still gets paid for doing speaking engagements. I think he's a lobbyist now. I think that's what's going on. But here's what he meant. The special interest groups, the lobby groups, big corporations, other countries, the money that runs through politics controls politics. And that's what he meant when he said to me, Brad, if you win this election, you're going to be an instant millionaire. That's always bothered me. Now, I got beat pretty soundly in the general election. I think I got 33% of the votes, something like that. But that has always stuck with me. Now, this brings me to the Trump impeachment. This is what I believe is going on with Trump. This is what I believe is happening. Now, I don't know this for sure. And before you call me a Trumper and say, "Oh, you're just 100% in favor of Trump, or you drunk the Trump juice," that's not the case with me. Personally, I don't care for most politicians. I think we'll call it Trump's bedside manner, or his lack of tact, which I think he could use some tact. I don't personally really care for Trump, but I care for what he's done for this country. I've watched what he's come into the office saying what he was going to do and standing behind it. That's what he's done. I think this country is in better shape than it's ever been. Now, when he gets his second term, and I'm going to make that assumption that he's going to get a second term, because I'm not worried about him being removed from office right now. Although he's been, the House has approved impeachment. The House has. We still have to go through who? We still have to go through the Senate. I do not believe that is going to happen. I don't believe they are going to move forward with removing him from office. But here's the other thing that I do not believe. And I think these people who live in a bubble, I think the ones that are in especially large metropolitan areas that are so heavily Democratic, that are surrounded by people that are, that's all they hear is they hear the heavily Democratic noise. I don't think those people realize that they are in a bubble in and of itself. I would challenge Americans, anybody watching this video, I challenge you to go look at a map of every state and pull it up by Democratic and Republican counties. This is so important when you are assessing the landscape of this country, because this country is a Republican country by landmass and by income, and by people who are producers, not takers, by people who are for American values, by people who are for the Constitution. This country is heavily, heavily, heavily Republican. You look at what's going on in Virginia right now with the anti-gun movement. There are 3 counties in Virginia out of 95 counties that are carrying that. That's wrong. That's why we have the Electoral College, and that's why we have a representative democracy in this country. So, do not worry yet about this impeachment, because I do not think it's ever going to pass the Senate. I don't think they're ever going to remove Trump from office. But here's why I am not worried. If you go look at the heavily Republican counties throughout the United States and see how much more we own and we hold and we possess and we produce as Americans in this country who are conservative. You go look at the land mass that we control as opposed to these. I'm getting excited. I feel it. I'm getting frustrated. I feel it. You go look at these libtards and where they are and how dependent they are on the rest of us. We'll simply tell them no. I don't have a problem if there was a quid pro quo, if the Ukrainian government was involved in illegal activity with Biden. I don't care. And I don't think most Americans should care if the Ukrainian government was doing something illegal with our former vice president or his family and money was still changing hands. Because remember, I said there's several things that matter. There's money in politics. We need to be able to say no to that. We need to be able to stop that. And I don't think that the rest of America and the rest of the counties that support constitutional American values are going to ever allow Trump to be removed from office. And I think a lot of liberals can look at this and say, well, how are you going to stop us from removing him from office? By force. We will tell you no. Those of us that are law-abiding American citizens, we will tell you no. We will tell you no very strongly. We will tell you you are not going to remove him from office. Try it. Go ahead. Try it. I don't think it's going to happen anyway. I don't think there's a possibility. Try it. Dare you. Wow, it won't shut off. Phone is frozen up. So if you're still watching this, my phone's frozen.